All right, everyone. Tonight's episode of Wrestle Magic, I am joined by a good friend of mine and, well, family member as well. So, my uncle Timothy Gross. He will be joining me in an interview with somebody very special and an absolute legend from the ring. Somebody who was the very first person to win a match at WrestleMania. Somebody who is a former Intercontinental Champion, a former Tag Team Champion, and a WWE Hall of Famer, Mr. Tito Santana. Sir, how are you doing currently, and what are you up to recently in life?
I'm doing good. I am totally retired from. I got another job when I kind of left wrestling. Became a teacher. Did it for 26 years. I retired from that for 3 years, and currently, my wife and I enjoy being both retired. We also had a salon that my wife ran for 25 years, and we got rid of that too, and my wife retired, so we both retired, and just trying to enjoy the last years of my life. Thank God so far I'm healthy, and we want to get the most, of our last years, and travel and visit places, and just take it one day at a time.
Absolutely, sir. Life is about enjoyment, and I'm glad that you're in good health and that you are enjoying your retirement. It's very nice to hear that.
Thank you.
Of course. And Tim, how are you doing as well? I'm glad that you could finally join us on the podcast side over here, finally going to YouTube. What's going on with you, buddy?
I'm doing well. Sorry, my nickname up there is Six Pack. I guess that's what I had before. I do not have six pack abs by any means. But I wanted to ask, Mr. Santana, what did you teach actually?
Well, I got a double certificate from college. I was a football player, and I got a degree in physical education and another one in Spanish. So I was a gym teacher for 4 years, and then I switched to Spanish for 22 years, and I completed 26, and it was an experience. I mean, it was an experience.
Was that? Sorry, Matt. I don't mean to ask questions, but I mean, was it strange when students would recognize you, and was that difficult at all?
It wasn't difficult. I live in a small town, and I taught Spanish for the 22 years in the town that I live in. So whenever we had back to school days, my room would be packed because the parents were of age where they were wrestling fans. The kids were too young. But everybody knew who I was, and everybody wanted to be in my class. And it was at times, well, I made it real clear that the kids would call me Señor Solis in the classroom. So it wasn't about wrestling. It was about teaching them Spanish.
Of course. Now, one question that I have to ask you about this. So did you ever have parents coming in at conferences and asking you for autographs or anything like that, sir?
Oh, yeah. They'd as a matter of fact, I would bring 8x10s, and I would, because, they want to know about their kids. They wanted to know about my career, and I accommodated them. The longer I taught, the better I became at managing the kids' lives, and understanding their abilities, and I was able to do pretty good with the kids, as a matter of fact, and to keep them engaged, and it was. It was fun most of the time, not always, but most of the time. There's some kids that, no matter who it is, they have no respect, and they come in to make your day miserable. And, you have to figure out how to deal with those kids also, without losing it.
Yeah, definitely hear that. And Tim, did I cut you off by accident there earlier?
Oh, no, it's fine. So I was going to say, Mr. Santana, you studied at was it West Texas University? Is that correct?
West Texas State University. Yeah.
And is it true you went to school with Tully Blanchard? You guys were on the same.
Yeah, Tully Blanchard was our quarterback. He transferred from SMU. He was one of the top quarterbacks in Texas, and then he was in a pretty serious injury, traffic injury, and crash, and he had a lot of damage. I mean, he had a big scar on the side. I really don't know what it was, but I know he had a big scar, and he came back, and he was a pretty good quarterback. Also on the same team was the $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase.
Whoa.
So, the three of us were there, at one point.
Interesting. And you were a tight end, correct?
Yeah. Yes, I was.
Interesting. I have to say, you do have the build for it, like the perfect build to be a tight end, especially in your heyday. You were well built. You were tall enough. You looked the part for sure as a tight end. And I wouldn't have really guessed for Tully to be quarterback, but DiBiase, what position did he play?
Well, DiBiase was only there 1 year. DiBiase was a nose guard on defense, and then they switched him to the offense. They made him into a guard, but talk about a turtle. He was so slow that he never played much. And he didn't last. He left, and he got into wrestling, a lot sooner than I did.
Fair enough. Who'd have thought that 3 Hall of Famers would all be playing on the same college team,
Yeah.
It's very true. Now, one thing that we do like to start off with in this show is we always kind of like to ask in the beginning, so what was your childhood like, and who exactly were you before wrestling and college football and everything really took over in life?
Well, my real name is Merced Solis, and I was born and raised in Mission, Texas. Mission, Texas is a little town that's 5 miles from the Mexican border down in the south, by South Padre Island, next to McAllen. I came from we were migrant workers. We came from a very, very poor background. We started going when I was 7 years old. Our family would migrate up north, and we'd work the fields. Probably the beginning, it was from the middle of April to the middle of October, and I'm surprised that I was able to keep moving up in my grades, because at the beginning we were missing school at the beginning of the year, at the end of the year, and at the beginning of the year. When I was a freshman in high school, that's when I started playing sports, and that's when the first time that I really started going to school full time. My brother and my brother was the one that was supposed to play football. He was a junior, and we were in Michigan, in Green Bay, Wisconsin. We were picking cherries, and we just left, and we came, and I wasn't supposed to play football, but I ended up playing football, and that was the beginning of my sports career.
Interesting. So that's where it all starts for you. So did you feel like any of the disciplines that you learned from being an athlete in high school transitioned into becoming a wrestler as well?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how much sports you've played yourself, either one of you, but you know that if you play a sport, if you want to do good, and if it's a team sport, you got to dedicate yourself. You got to work out, and you got to learn the ups and downs. You're not always going to win. You also got to learn, how to lose. It prepared me, because when I first started wrestling in 1977, January 1st, as a matter of fact, me and Tully Blanchard. He was a year behind me in school. We both moved to Tampa, Florida, to work in the Florida territory. We both went there together. His father was a promoter in San Antonio, and Tully had been wrestling for many, many summers. So Tully was polished. I didn't know the first thing about professional wrestling. his father started talking to me about becoming a professional wrestler, and I was a little bit afraid. I mean, the guys looked mean, and the only thing I had going for me was the fact that I was an athlete, and I used to think to myself, well, this guy knows that I don't know anything about wrestling, and he keeps telling me that I'm going to be good and I can make a lot of money. So, I'm going to give it a shot. I found out, I signed with the Kansas City Chiefs as a free agent, and I was there for 6 weeks. I had an injury before I even went to the Chiefs, and when I ran the 40, I ran a very slow time in the 40 because I really messed up my ankle, my Achilles, and I didn't say anything to anybody, and my Achilles was getting better and better. And as a matter of fact, I started every preseason game, but when the coach let me go, he says, "You're a hell of an athlete, but you're slow." I never thought he was going to come back and hunt me, but I should have asked him to tie me in the 40, because when I ran the 40, I ran a 5.1. When I was at West Texas State, I used to run a 4.8. So I think the 4.8 would have been okay, but the 5.1, certainly wasn't. So then when I left the Chiefs, my college coach hooked me up with the BC Lions in Canada, and I went to Canada for the rest of the season. And then I came back and, played a year with the BC Lions. And then it's when I started wrestling after that.
Interesting. And I don't want to hog the spotlight completely, so this will be the last question that I ask for a minute before I pass it over to Tim. But so who was your main trainer when you really started getting into wrestling, when you really started training?
There was a Japanese wrestler right there in Tampa, Florida. And, he was known for beating up the guys. You had to earn your stripes in professional wrestling before they even smarten you up. They would beat the crap out of you. I mean, they worked you hard. A guy by the name of Hiro Matsuda. Me and I don't know if you're familiar with Randy Orton. Oh. Randy Orton's father was Bob Orton, and Bob Orton had a brother by the name of Barry Orton. So he was breaking up at the same time. And for some reason, Hiro Matsuda didn't like Barry Orton because Barry hadn't started wrestling yet, but he'd get in the ring and he pretended he was like a heel, and he pretended to be one of the boys already. And I guess the Japanese old man, didn't figure that he paid his dues yet, and he didn't like him too much. But I had a good work ethic. He worked me hard, and I just listened to him, and he turned out that he started coming around, and helping me out, and turned out to be a real nice guy towards me.
Hey, I mean, hard work pays off, and coaches notice who's actually putting the work in. So I definitely believe that he saw what you were doing and just thought, hey, this guy's trying. I'm all for it. But next I'm going to pass it over to Six Pack Tim. Go ahead, take it over, man.
Well, I had a question. Yeah, I thought I'd heard about Hiro Matsuda. Wasn't he also the one who trained Hulk Hogan, I think? And several other...
he trained Hulk Hogan. Pretty much anybody that would go through, no matter how big you were, he'd bring you down to size. There's a story that he broke Hogan's either leg or ankle or something. Broke his leg. I've never verified that to be true, but I just heard somebody talking about Hulk, and the guy was talking about how much Hulk lied about everything. So I don't know if it was true or not. I ended up becoming friends with Hulk, and I mean, who's going to knock Hulk? I mean, to me, he was the Elvis of professional wrestling. I was very lucky that I was in the same territories with Hulk Hogan most of my career. We were in the AWA together in Minnesota, and I spent most of my career here with the WWE. And Hulk Hogan was here. So wherever Hulk was at, the stadiums were full.
Yeah, it's what was that like in the AWA when you were you worked Nick Bockwinkel there as well, right?
Yeah, I left the WWF back then in 1979 to go to the AWA Minnesota, and what a different territory compared to the other territories. You could we wrestle like 170 to 180 days a year. In the WWF, we wrestle like 340, 350 days a year.
Wow.
I mean, we worked like dogs. Not good for a married guy. You don't get to see your family very much. It was a big sacrifice, but I learned so much in the AWA. Vern Gagne used to run big shows like in St. Paul or Minneapolis or Chicago, and he'd only have like 5 or 6 matches. And Madison Square Garden, Vince McMahon used to have like 10 or 11 matches. So every match at the AWA was a main event. And whenever we used to tape the TV tapings and everybody was doing interviews, I mean, I was learning from the best, and I would listen to the best, that I spent 2 years in the AWA, and I ended up teaming up with Rick Martel there before we became Strike Force in the WWE, and that was a great experience. You talked about Nick Bockwinkel. I had, I think at one point they wanted to put the World Championship belt, because we started going into Houston and Chicago and Colorado, a lot of different places where they had Hispanics, and I heard later on that they were thinking about putting the belt on me before I decided to come back to the WWE.
Wow. Yeah, wow, that's pretty incredible. And when you worked with Martel early on, did you guys click, or how would you say, like, what was your impression of him when you first met Martel?
Well, Rick Martel was a little bit ahead of me. I think he was 2 or 3 years ahead of me with experience. And, you can't take anything away from Rick Martel. I mean, he was one great worker. And we teamed up and we clicked automatically. Rick hadn't been doing any, we still make appearances at WrestleCons and different cons that are going out throughout the country. And I just saw him a couple of months ago, and he said, Tito, I was just telling my wife that you and we never had a disagreement. We went in there and nobody argued about who was going to drop the match or who was going to take the fall, or, we did what we had to do, and we just shared, we helped each other in the ring, and we wrestled against the High Flyers. I don't know if you know about the High Flyers, but Greg Gagne and Jumpin' Jim Brunzell were the tag team champions in the AWA, and we had a program with those guys, and it was a good guy against a good guy team. And we had so many matches, and we worked up all the way towards the end. We had like 60-minute draws with a that's what you call a baby face match. Which a baby face match, it's very difficult because who's going to get the heat? The fans like to cheer for somebody and they like to boo for other people. Well, the fans wanted Martel and I to take the belt, so we were the good guys at the end, But again, I also learned a lot, competing against Greg Gagne and Jumpin' Jim Brunzell.
Ah, very nice. Now, Brunzell was quite the veteran by then, right?
Yeah, they both were. I mean, if I'm not mistaken, I believe both of them went to Minnesota University, and Brunzell was a pretty good athlete. I think he played college football for a little bit, and he was also a good high jumper, because I was a high jumper in high school also.
Huh. Well, so you were there until about, was it 1981, and then you went to Houston Wrestling. Is that correct, sir?
No, from there I went. From there I went to Georgia Championship Wrestling.
My apologies.
Jim Barnett was the promoter. Ole Anderson was the booker. Jim Barnett, I had met when I first started in 1977, and they told me that they were going to bring me in, and they made me all kinds of promises. Well, when I got there, Ole Anderson was the booker, and Ole Anderson had a big ego, and he ended up doing nothing with me. And I would ask him, by that time I had been in the business 4 years, so I knew what was going on. So I would ask him every time we did, because where they used to create the stars was on television. You go, they start promoting you on TV. They give you matches, you win, and people start to get to know you. And he was just keeping me off of TV, so I knew I wasn't going anywhere. And then all of a sudden, they were going to make me a big star. All of a sudden, he tells me, I don't have anything for you here, but Bill Watts wants you to come to Louisiana. He really wants you really bad. And Louisiana was a territory where you did a lot of driving. I mean, you could go wrestle 350 miles, and that night you had to start back and drive 350 miles to another town. You'd be spending a lot of time on the road, and I really didn't want to go there. But eventually, it's almost like the promoter in Louisiana was Bill Watts, and the booker in Atlanta was Ole Anderson. So it almost like they started working a program with me, because Ole Anderson, I had a guarantee, and Ole took the guarantee away from me. And then I started getting booked in Louisiana, and Bill Watts in Louisiana started paying me pretty good money. And, they just they were working. It's almost like a work, that they were like professional wrestling was a work. They were working, an angle on me to make me leave Atlanta and come to Louisiana. But my wife, we had just had a baby. We had a baby boy, and I had just bought a condominium in Atlanta. So I wanted to stay there for a while because they promised me that they were going to make me a big international star. And, finally got to the point where I told my wife, we're going to have to go to Louisiana. But before I was going to go to Louisiana, I called Vince McMahon Sr., the father of Vince McMahon. And I told, because when I left New York, I kind of made him my booker. And I called him up and I said, Vince, Ole's treating me like shit here. And, he lied to me. He told me he was going to do all this, and he hasn't done anything. Now they want me to go to Louisiana. And I said, I think I'm going to go to Louisiana and work for Bill Watts. Supposedly he wants me pretty bad. I said, I'm going to talk. This was on a Tuesday or a Wednesday morning. I said, I'm going to talk to him on Friday. And so he says, yeah, Bill Watts is a good man. So I work a couple more days. I go to Houston. That's where Bill Watts is going to talk to me. And Ernie Ladd, I don't know if you know who Ernie Ladd was.
Oh, the big cat.
The big cat. Yeah, he was the booker there. And when I got there, he says, because he played for Kansas City also. So he says, son, you're going to have to make the biggest decision of your life. And I said, what is that? He says, come with me. So he took me into another room. We were in the locker room. He says, Vince McMahon wants you to come back to New York. Bill Watts wants you to stay here. He wants to give you a big push. He says, you're going to have to make a decision. Well, my wife was from New Jersey, and I could be located in New Jersey and work in the WWF. So I said, Ernie, I can tell you, what I'm going to do. I'm going to go back to New York. New York was the biggest territory. And he says, no, you got to wait to talk. Don't tell don't tell Bill Watts that I talked to you. He's going to talk to you. So Bill Watts came and talked to me. And when he came in a little later, and I said, Bill, I can tell you. He says, no, don't make the decision. Think about it. Give it a couple of days and then call me. But he says, Vince McMahon wants you to call him in the morning. So, I was learning that professional wrestling was not like signing a contract and having a guaranteed a contract in the NFL. So, they made promises they didn't really have to keep, So I started to learn about the business, a bunch of thieves and a bunch of liars, that you had to deal with. So I called Vince McMahon in the morning, Saturday morning, because that's what they told me to do. And so they told me that Vince McMahon wanted me really bad. So I thought he was going to be excited for me to call him back. And I dialed his number. He picked up the phone, and there was like maybe about a minute of silence. And I'm thinking on my side of the phone, I said, don't tell me that Vince McMahon is part of this group, the three of them now, working on me. And I started to get a little pissed off. And, finally, with a high-pitched voice, I said, Vince, the reason I called you is because I was told to call you. And he said, yep. He says, it's time for you to come home. And he says, you're going to do your first TV taping on May 10th, because the WWF would do 2 days of taping. So May 10th and 11th, and you'd end up being on TV for 9 weeks before you would even come in. So, I had heard that Vince McMahon was a man of his word. So I said, okay, that's all I need to know. You don't have to tell me anything else. I'll come and I'll work hard for you. And, and I started May the 10th. And the reason I know it's May 10th is because May 10th, 1983, May 10th is my birthday, so I never forgot that.
Interesting. So you're traveling around all these territories and everything, gaining experience, but also feeling like you're getting jerked around. And then Vince finally calls you back or doesn't really call you back. You get told that you need to call Vince if you want to go back. It's interesting to hear that this is kind of the way the business was playing out at the time. I didn't realize sometimes this is just how the territories worked.
Oh, it was brutal, and according to a lot of the guys, I had it easier than most of them, a lot of backstabbing, there was only so many positions on top and everybody was fighting. So, I was never an office guy, but, guys would backstab you and go to the office if they had any dirt on you. And, it wasn't, it wasn't, as much as we got along, you had to watch your back every minute.
Definitely believe that. Seems very political at the time. But, I'm kind of wondering now, so which territory do you think was your favorite to work in?
Well, my favorite to work in was, without a doubt, the AWA. I learned a lot. And like I said, we only worked 170 days a year, so you could have a normal life. I was married at the time. I just got married, and, I was able to spend some time with my wife, which I didn't much once I left there.
Interesting. So you definitely had more family time with AWA. That's totally understandable. And am I correct in thinking that AWA was very heavy on their tag team division, or I guess just tag team matches in general?
Well, no, they had, the world champion, which was Nick Bockwinkel, which I don't know that Hulk ever became the world champion there, but he wrestled against him. No, there was a lot of singles talent there. All polished top workers. That could talk. Of Baron von Raschke. God, who's some of the other guys? I mean, Bruiser Brody. Ken Patera. Did I say Baron Von Raschke already?
Yes, sir.
Oh yeah.
Who were the guys from Canada? Vachon, Maurice Vachon, and
Mad Dog.
Mad Dog Vachon, yeah, and then the guy from Milwaukee that had the beer gimmick. I can't remember his name. Trying to get it out offhand real quick he's not. It'll probably come back in a little while.
Well, fair enough. But all right, so you really enjoyed AWA, but then you end up going back home to the WWF. How did it feel coming back to New York, or I guess just the WWF territory at that time after gaining all that experience and just everything else that you had gone through at that point?
Well, it felt pretty good. I made the most money with the WWF, and right away, I started making more money in the WWF than I did anywhere else. And it wasn't long. Jimmy Snuka was probably one of the top baby faces. Bob Backlund was a world champion, but Jimmy Snuka was over like $1 million. But he had a bunch of problems. He had a bunch of, I hate to talk about people, but he had problems. And he wasn't making a lot of the shows. And he was chasing Don Morocco for the IC belt, for the Intercontinental Champion. And I guess they couldn't trust him. And I ended up beating Don Morocco for the title. They put the title on me, which, sometimes you get breaks on other people's mistakes.
That may be true, sir, but I will say you were a workhorse as well, and that was the workhorse title at the time. I do not want to discredit you at all because you definitely earned it as well, my friend, for sure.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Of course, of course. Now, I did want to ask about this. How exactly did it feel when you were told, hey, you're going to be the one to walk out with that title after that? How did that feel knowing that they were trusting you with the gold at that point?
Oh, it felt so good, but I just thought, I just thought, like I was basically an unknown, in the WWF. And Don Morocco and Jimmy Snuka, they were battling for the IC champ, and Morocco just kept the belt, and then they're going to switch it to me, and I mean, I just couldn't believe, I just would pray, and I would just say, I hope that I can carry the load, because once you get a belt, there's a lot of responsibility before a champion, so I was just hoping that I could get the job done. And thank God that, the good Lord, was there to help me. And, I was able to do what was expected of me.
Absolutely.
I had one thing I had from like we've talked about, other sports. I had a good work ethic. I didn't get into the drugs. I didn't get into drinking. I was reliable. I didn't miss shows, and I did everything they expected me to do, as best as I could.
Absolutely. And I like to hear that because I'm also somebody who doesn't drink or anything as well. I keep it out of my life, and I'm, happy to see someone else that I've somewhat looked up to is also on the same sort of path. And he was even in that in his heyday. That's kind of nice to see and a little reassuring that I'm not the only one. But
no, you're not the only nerd. You're not the only nerd out there. There's a few of us.
Hey, nothing wrong with being nerds. We run the world. But
yes, right.
All right.
What was I'm sorry.
Ahead, Tim.
Could I just say what was Magnificent Morocco like? Was he a difficult person to work with? I mean, I hate to say it like that, but
no. I mean, Magnificent Morocco was also, very reliable. And I mean, he was. I don't know if you remember. I mean, he had the biggest shoulders, the biggest calves.
he was huge.
I mean, he was huge, and the attitude that he had when when he dropped the belt to me was, unbelievable. He did it, with a smile on his face, and we ended up having a great match in Boston when he dropped the belt to me. Unfortunately, they I don't know if this was planned or what, but they were taping our match, and before you know it, Vince McMahon was there, and Gorilla Monsoon and Pat Patterson, and I won the title, and everybody had left the locker room. I couldn't believe that. And then they tell me that they didn't tape the ending where they show where I beat him. And the ending was a fantastic ending. I caught him out of nowhere, and they were never able to show it on TV because they didn't tape it. It was pretty upsetting.
That's why
that's a little bit of a heartbreaker.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a heartbreaker. Yeah, especially your first, major title like that. Wow.
Yeah.
You went on to feud with Greg Valentine. Is that correct?
Yeah, I went on and defended the title, a few guys, and then all of a sudden I ended up having a feud. It's a long story, but I was wrestling Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff in Erie, Pennsylvania. And during our match, Mr. Wonderful tore up my cartilage in the match.
Ooh.
And I was the champion, and I had to walk on crutches. The next day I flew to Brantford, Ontario. As a matter of fact, Andre the Giant helped me get to my room. We were staying in Pittsburgh. We drove from Erie to Pittsburgh, and I was on crutches. We went to Brantford because that's where they were taping our TV shows in Canada. And I walked in during their meeting. Vince McMahon and all the agents were there setting up the TV, and they see me in crutches. And I said, Vince, I said, my knee's bad. I said, I'm going to have to go home and, probably get surgery because I didn't know what was wrong yet. I said, but I got to go and get it checked. And I said, I thought I could do a feud because I loved wrestling Mr. Wonderful, Paul Orndorff. We had great matches. So I thought I was going to do the what we used to call angle or the feud with Mr. Wonderful, but Mr. Wonderful was bipolar. And Mr. Wonderful would lose his temper, and he would tell everybody to go to hell. He would cuss them out, and he wasn't afraid of anybody. So they didn't trust him to put the belt on him. So I told Vince, I said, I can go out there, and I can, make the title switch. And they said, yep, we'll make a title switch. I like the idea. But it's George Scott was the booker for Vince. He said, we're going to do it with Greg Valentine. George Scott liked Greg Valentine. So I said, well, okay, I can. I taped up my knee because playing football, I had knee injuries. I knew how to tape up my knee. I taped up my knee. I put a knee pad. I put a brace. I was able to get in the ring with minimum limp. And I told Greg, I said, as soon as I stick my head through the ropes, just attack me and just put the boots. And so then that's what he did. And then he put the figure 4 leg lock on me. And then he just cinched up on the ropes. And, they carried me out in a stretcher. I came to New Jersey from Brantford, Ontario. I went to see the doctor. I scheduled a surgery for my knee right away. Vince McMahon, somebody was telling me this a couple of days ago. That was the first time they brought the cameras to a surgery room, and they taped the whole surgery. And I told the guys that had the camera and the microphones from the WWE, I said, as soon as I wake up, I want you to put the mic, right in front of my face so I can, and ask me, about Greg Valentine. And that's what they did, because I figured if I wake up, I was still going to be groggy, from the medicine. And it's exactly what they did. And, that they showed the surgery, and, we had a legit angle to go on, and it turned out that we ended up having the longest feud in the history of the WWF.
Oh. Wow. Now, is that what led you to using the figure 4 maneuver as like a counteract?
Yeah, because Greg Valentine had the figure 4, and that's what he put the figure 4. And we ended up doing supposedly Jack Briscoe taught me, because he had the figure 4 also. Jack Briscoe was Jerry Briscoe's brother, and he was the NWA world champion also, and he was a very good wrestler. And supposedly I learned it from Jack Briscoe, and so then we would go from figure 4 to figure 4.
Huh. Sorry to interrupt you, Matt. I thought you were going to say.
Oh, no, it's all good, man. I was going to pass it back to you anyways in a second there, but one question that I did want to ask you about, Mr. Santana. So I have heard that a lot of people would have described you as almost like the gentlemanly wrestler of your time. And with that, I was wondering, is that something that you strive to be, or is that just your personality? Is that just who you are?
I think that's my personality. I told you, I wasn't an office guy. I just believed that I would let my work do the talking for me. And, I worked hard, whether there was 100 people there or 90,000. I figured if somebody paid for a ticket, they deserved a good match from me. And, I went out there to give them, everybody that was there a good match. Like I said, in professional wrestling, you have to watch your back, and I was a pretty good sized guy, but I was small. And there were some tough guys in professional wrestling. I just treated everybody with respect, and everybody respected me. I didn't stab anybody. Nobody stabbed me. And, I really never had any problems with, thank God. I became friends with King Tonga, who was probably the toughest guy in the business. So I became real close to him. So I figured if I ever had any problems, I'd have a backup.
Smart move. Bring in a heavy to be your backup no matter what, and you're all good.
Right.
I like that. Now, I am also kind of wondering about, so eventually you get back together with Rick Martel as Strike Force. What was the creative process like? Did you have any input on that, or do they just say like, hey, you guys work together, try it again. Let's see how this goes?
No, I don't know if you remember, Rick Martel got teamed up with Tom Zink. And
Can-Ams, right?
Yeah, Can-Am, the Can-Am connection. And all of a sudden, Tom Zink, the way the WWF paid guys, Rick Martel was a veteran. He'd been in the WWF before. So they'd work, they'd get different pay. And I guess Tom Zink didn't like that. And I think that's the reason that he left. I don't know. But before you know it, Tom Zink is gone. So Vince McMahon comes and talks to me. He says, Tito, would you mind teaming up with Rick Martel? Because they weren't doing anything. I was up and I was down. I was up and I was down in the WWF. And Vince told me, you go up and then I bring you back down. You never go down below the middle. I'll keep you up middle and top, middle, never below. So he says, would you mind teaming up with Rick Martel? He says, we'd like to call you the Border Patrol. And I said, Vince, I'll do whatever you want me to do. I said, but at times the Border Patrol to me was not a good name, because recently there was some Mexicans or Hispanics that were trying to cross the border on railroad cars. And it was so hot in the South that some of them would die, of heat. While they were in their car, and it was on the news. And I told Vince, being called the Border Patrol could make us heels, because of it was the Border Patrol that was taking care of the border, and he says, you got a point. And then the next TV taping, he says, nope, you guys are going to be Strike Force. We didn't have, for the most part, we didn't have much input. we just did what the boss said, and we hoped that we were involved in feuds, and that's when you made money, when you were involved, in feuds.
Absolutely. Now, when it came to you two winning the titles together, and Tim, after this question, I'll pass back to you for a couple more because we're getting a little bit close to the end, but not too close yet. But when it came to you and Rick Martel winning the tag team titles together against the Hearts, how did you feel about it? And honestly, I feel like it kind of came full circle at that point for you guys, considering how you had worked together prior to that point. Did you guys feel a lot of pride in that, or how did you feel?
Yeah, we did feel a lot of pride. The Hart Foundation was a fantastic team, and for them to drop the belts to us, was big, and for us to become the champions. I had been the tag team champion earlier in my career in 1979, teamed up with Ivan Putski, but the territory had gotten so much bigger. 1985, I think 86, when I don't remember what year it was, but yeah, I mean it was a lot of there was a lot of pride to regain the tag team championship belts.
Absolutely. And I feel like that's just one of those moments that kind of feels like comes full circle because, you guys worked together prior, you come into the WWF or come back to the WWF, I should say. And now it's like, okay, we worked together well before, we liked it before, but hey, here we are with the gold now. And that match was very good. I actually watched it before hopping on the call, and I really liked seeing it. You guys, it was very technically good and very technically sound, and I really enjoyed watching it. Great tag team wrestling. So yeah, gotta say it's one of my favorite tag team matches that I think I've seen in a while. But yeah, with that, Tim, go ahead, take over for the last couple of questions before we get into the end generic ones.
Okay. I understand you guys did lose the titles then to Demolition.
Yes.
Yeah, and I was actually going to ask, what was it like working with Demolition?
Well, we ended up we were in California. I think it was Sacramento. We were doing some kind of pay-per-view up there, and we got to the arena, and they called me into the office, and Rick Martel was in there talking to Vince, and he says, Tito, Rick Martel has to take some time off. His wife has some kind of illness. I never found out what it was. And I didn't really pursue it. They told me, I believed it. So he says, you got to drop the belts to Demolition. And that's did we drop the belts then to Demolition? I think that was the night that we dropped the belts. And that was the first time we wrestled. And man, Demolition, those guys were both over 300 pounds. And they used to, Demolition, they believed the name Demolition. They went in there to demolish us. I mean, they beat the crap, literally beat. I mean, they'd hit you with forearms on your back. And Rick started the match, and he says, Tito, I got to get out. He says, these guys are stiff. So I go in there, and they start beating me up, I was glad when the match was over. Here, take the belts, leave me alone. But they were a great team. And
is that where? So is that when Martel had an injury, or Martel had to disappear for a while? Correct. And then
he was gone for a year. Yeah, and, then he came back.
Yeah, and that was Royal Rumble. Is that correct? 89.
I think that's when he came back, and I think I ended up wrestling him in the Royal Rumble, if I'm not mistaken. And then I ended up beating him, and they set up the split, because eventually they teamed us up, and we wrestled against Tully Blanchard and Arn Anderson, and that's when Rick Martel, turned on me. He left me in the ring, and they beat the crap out of me, and then. I don't know how long it took after that Rick Martel came back as the model Rick Martel.
Okay, then. And, you ended up defeating him again at the King of the Ring. Is that correct? In 1989, I think?
Yeah. I think, I think you're right. When they split us up, I was hoping that we'd have a long feud because, we used to have some fantastic matches and the fans wanted, the split up was done right, and I was supposed to come out with a big, we're supposed to come out with a big angle, being him. And before you know it, it's all gone. And he's doing a feud with Jake the Snake Roberts, and I was left in the dust. They just totally forgot about me.
It's definitely unfortunate for the time. I mean, I still think that you're one of the better workers from the time period. And I honestly do kind of put you and Rick Martel kind of on an even plane. And that's kind of why I feel like you guys worked so well together as a tag team. Do you kind of agree with that, or?
I totally agree. I mean, we didn't talk about what we were going to do. We would just go in there and we just let the match develop, depending on our opponents. And we could work against anybody. We could work against little guys. We could work against big guys, and it was never a problem. We both did what we had to do, and there's never an argument. Who's going to do this? Who's going to do that? We just we were professionals, and we did it, and did it pretty good.
Absolutely agree, for sure. Now, we are getting close to the end of the show here, and this is where we kind of like to ask a few somewhat generic questions, but it gives a little bit of insight as well to things that you've seen in the ring and how you kind of view things. So the first one that I like to ask a lot of people, who do you believe is the greatest of all time when it comes to wrestling, sir?
Who do I believe is the greatest of all time? God, it's so hard because if you were a fan in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, there were so many good wrestlers. I believe that Terry Funk was one of the greatest of all times, and he wasn't always a good guy. He was a bad guy. But the stuff that he would do in the ring, and then those NWA champions, most of the time they go into a different territory and they wrestle all the top baby faces, and they would end up going like an hour pretty much every night. I saw him wrestle many draws. So Terry Funk, the biggest draw, like I said, Hulk Hogan, nobody even came close. I mean, the guy had charisma. The guy, but Vince knew how to promote him. Vince created a star. He made Hulk Hogan, and it's been asked. I don't think anybody else could have carried the job. I didn't know how much Hogan was doing out of the ring. I mean, he was taping commercials. Yes. For a bunch of merchandise for other companies. He said that Vince would call him. He'd be in Miami. You got to be in LA tonight. You got to fly. What am I doing? He would go. So he didn't have a life either. I don't know that anybody else. I mean, he went through 3 or 4 marriages, and I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that he was gone so much.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. It seems like a hard life to go through, honestly, with all the traveling and all of that. I mean, how do you anchor yourself in a family when you're never around your family? I mean, it does seem very difficult.
Yeah,
for sure. But all right, so fair answer. I do like Terry Funk as well. Now, the next thing that I kind of like to ask in that, so if you could go back in time and just be in your prime and you could face anybody from history, this could include anybody from present day, anybody in the past, who would you want to run one last match with? And it can be any stipulation that you'd like. We don't care if you want to have a dog collar match with somebody, for all we care. Anybody that you would want to go against, and how would you do it?
I would have liked to have had a championship match against The Rock.
Yeah.
I mean, The Rock was, he and Stone Cold Steve Austin. I remember because I didn't watch wrestling, and then for some reason I happened to just be watching one of their matches, and all of a sudden, all of a sudden you had all the fans answering, lines. He started a line and they would finish it, and I'd never heard that before. I couldn't believe it. Stone Cold was the same way, but, if I had a choice, it would be The Rock.
Okay. Totally valid choice. The Rock is one of the greatest of all time when it comes to both heels and just being a wrestler in the 90s. He's what him and Stone Cold really made it big. So totally understandable. I can definitely see why The Rock is a great answer for you, sir. And I think you guys would have a barn burner, honestly. It'd be awesome.
I do too. Yeah.
But yeah, so next thing that I like to ask everybody that comes on here. So if you could go back in time and tell yourself one piece of advice, or, if you have a few more than that, before you started your training for wrestling, what would you want to tell yourself?
I would tell myself, professional wrestling is not like any other professional sport. You're going to deal with, Joe Blanchard told me, Tito, my contract with the Chiefs, I signed $18,000 a year. Then I went to Canada and I signed for $20,000 a year. And Joe Blanchard is telling me, Tito, you could be making $85,000 a year as a wrestler. Well, little did I know, I started wrestling. Probably the first few matches that I made, I spent more money making those matches than what I was getting paid. I was making $40, $50 a match and driving 300 miles.
Jeez.
What a shock that was. I thought I was going to start making money right away. Well, that wasn't the case. It's the promoter in Florida was very honest. He told me, you get out of it what you put into it. And sure enough, things started changing for me pretty quick. I got lucky. I went from one place to another, and every time a little higher, and every time a little bit more money. And it took me 2 years before I started making more money that I could have made in professional football.
Yeah, that's understandable. It's a good piece of advice as well, I feel, for almost anybody that's getting into professional wrestling, because not everybody would know exactly what they're getting into, especially back then. Completely different animal towards, how it is now.
Oh my God.
Completely different.
Wrestle Magic.
But, all right, so now we're going to move into my favorite segment. So, Mr. Santana, we like to ask everybody who comes on the show what recommendations you would have for the audience. This can be movies, TV shows, video games, your favorite cat breed, your favorite smoothie flavor. We don't care what it is, just something that you think everybody should try or experience. Sir, what would you tell anybody on the street and anybody, in the audience right now, what you would recommend for them?
Well, what I would recommend for them is to take life a little bit lighter, not serious all the time. When I was, for many, many years, no vacations, because the last thing I wanted to do when I was home, go on a vacation. So we didn't take any vacations. Now my wife and I, we go to Aruba every year. And to be able to go to Aruba, it's a beautiful place. And to just lay there and relax, enjoy yourself, save up to spoil yourself and your family, and enjoy life. It's too short. You'll be a grandpa before you know it. You're young, and all of a sudden we're pop up and Nana, and and I told you, we are enjoying life. We worked for it, and we're enjoying it. I tell my kids, there might not be a lot of money left when we leave here, but you'll have a house that a nice house that we live in. You can have that, but don't count on a lot of extra cash, because we're going to enjoy our lives, my wife and I.
Hey man, you've earned it. You deserve to be able to enjoy what you've got, and towards the end of your years, you know what? Get whatever you want, enjoy your life. There's nothing wrong with that. It's not being selfish. You're living life right. I really do admire that about you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Of course, sir. And do you have any last messages for the audience outside of that as well before we cut into mine and Tim's recommendations as well?
Well, there's no fan like a professional wrestling fan. And I started wrestling in 1977. And the true fan loves professional wrestling, and they love Tito Santana. They continue to support me wherever I go. And I want to thank all of you for your continued support. And whenever I go to Comic-Cons or any events, I love to listen to the fans. They always are thanking me for their memories of their childhood memories. And, it doesn't get old to hear how you made an impact in their lives. It'll last forever for me. I love talking to the fans. Whenever I go somewhere, I give the fans the time that they deserve, and we talk, and I love hearing them, tell me their stories.
Absolutely. And I have to appreciate you, looking out for the fans more than anything. It's cool to see somebody who really appreciates us, who are watching so much and investing so much. I just really like talking to you, man. You're a really cool person. I really like this,
Thank you. I enjoyed this too. I mean, you guys were prepared, I have to say.
As prepared as we can be. But all right, sir. So going to move over to Tim here for a second. Tim, do you have any last message for the audience and your recommendation for this week?
Well, just a quick message. I just want to say I was always, I'm not trying to get weird here, but sir, I was always such a huge fan of yours. I still am, absolutely. But I'm one of those fans. That's the way I look at it. And I'm glad I got to speak with you in this, this small way. I used to absolutely love watching you, especially you working like with against whether it was Valentine or DiBiase. I loved seeing you against Kurt Hennig and these great. I just love the matches because it was so athletic. You actually got to see a lot of counters and reversals and holds, and it wasn't just nothing wrong with the Hulk Hogan's, but it was nice to see something besides the big power move and then the pose, and just see some great technical wrestling. And I appreciate it. I just want I so many years of watching you, and I'm thankful to be able to do this interview. And I guess as far as my recommendation, I was just going to say I recently read the book Dr. Sleep by Stephen King, and if you're a fan of The Shining, I just wanted to recommend that book. It's not profound or anything, but that's what I got.
Fair enough. Well, all right, guys, you know how I like to end the show, but first, my recommendation. So, a couple years ago, guys, I earned this medal here from doing a ruck march that was 100 miles, where I had to do it in over 4 days, 20-something pounds on my back the entire way. And honestly, I'm just going to say I recommend to anybody who wants a seriously hard workout and just to keep training for that. Nijmegen's Ruck March is amazing, and then there are many others around the world. I highly recommend. If you want a crazy workout, go for it. It's something that it's an amazing experience. And it was funny, when I was doing that march, I actually met Reuben Marines while I was there who were also doing the marches, and I thought that was really cool just to meet them because I didn't even realize Aruba had a military at the time. But yeah, it was fantastic, and I really enjoyed it. But yes, that's going to be my recommendation for this week. And you guys know how I like to end the show. Do something nice for somebody. You never know who needs it out there. Somebody's in need of, hey, it could be just as simple as, someone needs $2 to cover their grocery bill extra or whatever. It takes a quick card swipe, or, hey, open up your wallet for 2 seconds and give up, a quick buck. It's not that hard. There's people who just need it out there. But with that, you guys know how I like to end the show. In the words of my old buddy, Memphis Mark, we are out.
Wrestle Magic.